with Take Your Best Shots podcast, and I'm here with John Mullin today. Welcome aboard, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Hey, the first time I met you, you walked into the CrossFit North Star, and we put you through a workout, and you had glazed eyes, and you were like a tub of goo because you had body problems with your back and who knows what else. Tell me why you came back.
Yeah, well, so, I had been working out with a personal trainer at Lifetime Fitness, and he was supposed to be the specialist in corrective exercises. And I had been doing it with him for 3 months, and it was making no progress whatsoever. I was doing everything he said. I was doing the workouts at home that I was supposed to.
Now, you had, back problems?
Yeah, lower back issues. So a couple of years before, I had collapsed in my kitchen some Sunday evening and ended up going to the emergency room and being hospitalized for 3 days with a bulging disc that was impinging on a nerve root. So if you've never had that before, it's incredibly excruciating, painful.
Yeah, never had.
Yeah, it's awful. I don't recommend it whatsoever. So anyway, I had been working out with him, and it was costing a lot of money, and I was not getting results. So why continue? In the meantime, I had been listening to a podcast by a guy named Rob Wolf, and he kept talking about this thing called CrossFit, which I had never heard of. So I consulted Google, and hey, this is CrossFit. Saw a video of a guy doing a workout called Cindy, and I was just like, wow, I want to be able to do that. So I looked up, hey, is there a gym anywhere near me? I've never heard of this. Turns out there was a gym a mile away. That's your gym, CrossFit North Star.
What did your Lifetime Fitness guy say to you?
Yeah, he when he was trying to get me to re-up, and I said, no, it just costs too much. I'm not getting results. He says, well, we can do something via email. I said, no, I think I'm going to give this CrossFit thing a try. And he kind of smirked and said, you can't do CrossFit. And I was like, oh, well, there you go.
You struggled that first day. Tell me about that, because I gave you no sympathy.
Yeah.
I think that kind of helps you, because you were like, oh, this guy's supposed to be kissing my ass, and you didn't get it.
No, actually, what I didn't like was somebody pretending to kiss my ass. I liked kind of the no mercy and, the challenging me. I tend to be one of those kind of guys that when somebody says you can't do something, that's kind of when I go, okay, I'll show you. So yeah, I walked in your door and you kind of put me through some basics, and then I did my first workout, which I wouldn't even call it a workout, based on what I had done later on. But it left me I was a sweat angel on the ground. It was just covered in sweat, exhausted, like, whoa, what happened? I think you videotaped that and posted that on the Facebook page.
May have. I just remember that I would have put $50 that you were never coming back.
Yeah, no, I came back. I don't know if I came back the next day or if I gave it another day in between, but I came back, and boy, we got to the point where I remember I was dedicated enough to it that you would invite me in on the off days, and occasionally we do 2-a-day workouts.
Yeah, that was a time in my life where 2-a-days seemed to make sense, but not anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so you did the CrossFit thing, and you started to get a little bit more fit, and you started to enjoy it. And then you started to lift a lot of weight, for you. I mean, it was big time.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think...
then you got sick.
Yeah.
You got some kind of, what's it called again?
Well, so I 9 months into it, I got rhabdomyolysis, exertional rhabdomyolysis. So it's an interesting thing that happens that most people don't know about. It's basically when you demand more energy output from your muscles than your body can replenish. And what happens is the cells explode and release a protein that can clog your kidneys and kill you. So it was.
So how close were you to death?
I don't know that I was that close to death. The doctors seemed to think that maybe I was. So I had. It was the week of Thanksgiving, 8 years ago, in fact. So we're almost 8 years, almost to the day. And I'd gone in on a Monday and done. The workout was called Angie, which is 100 pull-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 push-ups, 100 squats. And I knew I could do 35 pull-ups in a minute. So I was thinking, okay, it'll take a little longer.
Kipping pull-ups, right? Not real pull-ups.
Yeah. Surprised I didn't get a torn rotator cuff at that point. But yeah, so thought 5 minutes for each of the different exercises. If I'm done in 20 minutes, I'll be happy. If I can do it in 18, I'll be thrilled. So I jump up on the bar and crank off 35 kipping pull-ups, jump down, take a little rest, and then I jump back up, and I can only get like 10. And then I jump down, and then I get like 6, and then like 3, and then 2. And so 9.5 minutes later, I'm done with the pull-ups, and I'm wondering what the heck happened. And as I get off the bar, my arms won't hang straight. They're hanging kind of crooked like this.
So you look kind of like Andy DeMarco.
Sure. So I'm kind of thinking, that's weird. And I proceed to finish the workout. And, all in all, it was like 27, 28 minutes, all in to get it done. And I was like, I don't know what happened. I feel like I crashed and burned. Well, next day I wake up and I'm super sore. which I was used to. I've been doing CrossFit for 9 months at that point. Went in for the workout, and I think the RX was like cleans with 135 pounds. I couldn't even move the bar off the ground, which is weird because I could certainly clean way more than that at that point. So I went down to 95 and just struggled through the workout and kind of thought, what's going on? Well, Wednesday I'm even more sore, and Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, I'm even more sore. Friday morning I wake up and I'm even more sore, and I'm just kind of scratching my head going, this isn't right. I shouldn't still be getting sore from a workout I did 5 days ago. So, 7 a.m., I consult Dr. Google to see, what could this be? And I come across this thing called, rhabdomyolysis, which is apparently a known risk of CrossFit. So, I called you, actually, and you said, yeah, that doesn't sound too good. I tell you what, maybe you should pop a couple of ibuprofen, and if you don't feel better by, this afternoon, head into urgent care.
Probably some bad advice.
Yeah, well, it turns out ibuprofen is not what you want to be taking when you got rhabdo, but if you don't know you
Especially with the kidney problem.
Yeah. So I decided, well, I'm going to hop through the shower, and at the time, I was in the best shape that I've ever been in my life. I was always kind of the scrawny kid or the little chubby kid, but never really the athlete. I was more mathletic than athletic. So I hop out of the shower, and I'm kind of looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm just ripped. I've got, six-pack abs. I've got, I'd had people over the course of the previous few months had been, just making comments like, wow, you look really V-shaped. That's awesome. And it feels good when you're not that guy, right? Well, I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm looking at my arms, and my biceps are bulging, and my forearms are bulging, kind of like Popeye. And I was like, dang, man, I look good. And then I kind of scratch my head, and I go, I don't look like this. Something's off. And
which is a side effect of rhabdo, correct?
it is swelling, extreme swelling. So my
Did
wife
you swell everywhere in your body?
nope, just the arms.
Okay.
So my wife happened to get up, which normally she sleeps later, but she saw my arms and she goes, you know what, you need to go to the hospital right now. She goes, don't go to Apple Valley Medical Center, head to Ridges. So I show up at Ridges Hospital in the ER at 8 in the morning, and they kind of triage me, and they think I'm just crazy. I said, I think it might be rhabdomyolysis, and they roll their eyes at me and go, it's not rhabdomyolysis. And I go, okay, well, how do you know? And they go, because you didn't just run a marathon, you didn't get crushed by a building and stay there for 3 days, and you didn't fall and break your hip and lay on the ground for 3 days. I'm like, okay, well, what do we do? And they said, well, you're going to have to go wait, and so basically I spent 8 hours waiting in the ER waiting room, watching all the more emergent patients come in. Finally, 4:30 in the afternoon, they get me into a room. Doc comes in. What seems to be the problem? So I explain it to him, and I say, hey, I think it might be rhabdo. And he rolls his eyes and goes, oh, you consulted Dr. Google, huh? He goes, well, it's not rhabdo. And I said, okay, well, what do you think it is? And he goes, I don't know, we're going to run some tests. And I said, can you please indulge me and just maybe check my creatine phosphokinase levels, which is a biomarker for rhabdo?
You actually said that
and
to
he
him?
he just rolls his eyes, and 2 hours later he comes back and he goes, oh, dude, you nailed it. You got rhabdo and you got it bad. We got to admit you. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, we got to get you started on IV fluids immediately, and we got to make sure your kidneys don't shut down. So they put me in. They were looking for a quiet place for me, so I ended up being on the cancer floor. Ended up spending 5 days in the hospital, which for a guy who's used to working out, daily, if not 2 a days, laying in bed for 5 days is torture.
Now, what did your wife, Runa, say to you? I mean, seriously, think about the implications that would have had on her life.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to just go work out.
Right. She was pretty ticked off. It was not a good situation. As you've been a CrossFitter, right? As everybody knows, the CrossFitters always got to tell everybody about it. It's like a religion, right? So I've been trying to get her to come do CrossFit with me, and obviously after this, she's like, I don't want you going back, and I sure as hell ain't going in there.
But you did go back.
I did.
Let me ask you a question before that. Where was your trainer in all this when you were going down the rhabdo tunnel? The trainer should have seen that. What was going on with that?
What's interesting is I had always historically worked out with you, but your partner, you had kind of taken a leave of absence at that point. You were kind of sorting out what you wanted to do.
No, that was a forever leave of absence.
Well, you didn't know at the time.
Right.
You just kind of stopped coming and kind of said, I'm going to be away for a month or so. So it was your partner, and when I texted him from the hospital and said, hey, I'm hospitalized with rhabdo, his response was, oh dear. When I ended up going back, after like 6 or 8 weeks, he was kind of like, yeah, well, your form wasn't very good. I said, well, why don't you say something? I said, I told you to get your chin over the bar. And it was kind of like, well, get your chin over the bar versus you might die.
Well, when you have 30, 40 people going at it, sometimes you can miss some stuff, I imagine.
Well, and I think that's one of the dangers. There's magic in CrossFit, but there's a dose of poison there too. Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say at this point, I was never able to get back into really doing CrossFit, and the reason was I didn't know where that line was, where you're walking the edge of the cliff, because that's where you get the good gains, where you're kind of on the edge of maybe potentially hurting yourself, but you never know. Are you gonna fall off? When I fell off, and that can be dangerous. I had 3 kids at home, have a wife that all depend on me. Trying to explain that to your boss at work, what happened?
Is this your German boss?
No, this was a different company.
Okay.
And my boss and I at the time didn't see eye to eye, so he was doing his own research at the time, trying to figure out, is he making this up or what?
Well, it's not very common. It doesn't happen to everybody.
No, but there's 2 things that have to happen in order for you to be able to get rhabdo. Number 1, you have to be strong enough to be able to hurt yourself. And prior to that, I was not strong enough, but obviously I got to a point where I was. But you also have to have the mental mindset to be able to push yourself beyond your limits. And that's both of those things are things that most people don't have. So clearly I had it at the time.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because the people that tend to gravitate towards CrossFit, I think a majority of them do have both of those.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe
majority, not everybody. Not when you get the housewife who just wants to try it out because it's popular on internet.
Yeah.
But if you get most of the people, that's what you do. You push it to the nth degree.
Your typical person that will get rhabdo from CrossFit is somebody who's fit by any other fitness standards other than CrossFit. They'll show in for their first workout, they'll do it, they'll say, hey, this is great, they'll come in for their second one, and their second one they'll really push it hard, and that's what usually does it. I think it's a lot more common now than it was 8 years ago. Because,
I don't know. I do know that you got the nickname Johnny Rhabdo.
Yeah. Badge of honor.
It's kind of still sticks.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move away from CrossFit. It was good to meet you there, and I enjoyed pushing you to the nth degree. Because with that type of physical activity, you get camaraderie, but you also get pushed.
Yes,
and that's fun.
Yep.
So I want you to talk a little bit about your life now. I mean, you've got a wife, Runa.
Yeah.
She's Bengali.
Yeah, her parents are straight off the boat. They came here, I don't know, I want to say 44, 45 years ago.
The boat or the airplane?
I don't know. It was
I
a long
bet you
time
they
ago.
took an airplane. Okay, 45 years ago. So one of the things that I'm very curious about with you is that it's marrying into that family has to be different than marrying into the normal, Minnesotan girl, let's say.
Well, so I've only had
what are the
one
differences?
experience, so I don't know what marrying into that kind of the traditional, white boy from the suburbs marries a white girl from the suburbs. I will say there was some culture shock initially.
Well, explain some of that for me, will you?
Yeah, I mean, so in the Indian culture, anytime you go into somebody's house, the matriarch must feed you, always. And so every time I would show up there, it's like, hey, John, are you hungry? And regardless of if you're hungry or not, she's going to make something. And you better eat some of it. And no matter how much you eat, she's going to say, is that all you ate?
I don't think that's just an Indian thing. I think Russians are very similar with that.
I think you're right. I think other cultures other than America,
right.
Even though the Americans tend to be the ones who are overweight.
Well, it's what they're serving, too.
True. So, but it was, sitting around for dinners, they didn't eat with silverware. They would eat with their hands. So they're kind of scooping it in, and I was kind of like, whoa, this is different. At the time, again, white boy from the suburbs, that, ketchup was spicy at the time. So I couldn't eat the normal standard Indian food that she would make. So she would always have to make something separate just for me. Now, that was what, 1994?
Come on, man. I mean, seriously?
Oh, yeah, she would. I mean, it was,
You couldn't eat the food because it was too hot.
Not the way they made it for themselves. I mean, it was kind of crazy hot.
Nowadays, that's normal though.
Nowadays, I'm fine, and quite frankly, on a lot of occasions, my mother-in-law will say, "Oh my God, it's so chal. How can you eat that?" And it's, it's.
So how long you been married?
Got married in 2002, so 16 years.
16 years. And you got 3 kids.
3 kids, yep.
Okay, so. Did you have to convert to Hinduism or anything like that?
No.
I don't know. I'm just asking, man. Don't laugh.
Well, no, it's Hinduism is actually interesting compared to a lot of other religions. So it's a polytheistic religion, and like when the white Christians and Catholics came to India, the Indians already have thousands of gods. They were like, oh yeah, Jesus Christ, another god, yeah. So my father-in-law was actually raised by the Catholic missionaries in Catholic school. He's actually a Hindu priest, but he's read the Bible probably more than most Christians have. He's read the entire thing. He actually has an understanding of it.
Now, what is a Hindu priest? I mean, it's not like a Catholic priest where they have to go through the seminary and go to that route?
I don't know what the qualifications are that you need to do for it. What I do know, though, is that he was the president of the Hindu Society of Minnesota for a number of years. He's very well known in the community. He actually, even still, he's in his mid-80s. He gets called to do weddings and that kind of thing. He goes down to Rochester fairly regularly to do pujas and weddings and stuff like that. So what's interesting, though, now that I've been a part of this culture, and there's a very big Indian community here in the Twin Cities, and they've all invited me and his family, as well as my brother-in-law, as well as all the other white guys and white girls that joined the community. And it's a wonderful, amazing community of just really good people.
So you're saying that they invited you in as an equal?
Oh,
or
absolutely.
were you just a token white guy?
No. Well, so I would say my brother-in-law paved the way.
Okay.
He got married to Runa's sister much earlier. Runa and I had just started dating about the time that they were getting married. So he kind of paved the way. I will say, after my wife Runa and I had been dating for 3 years, I remember she had an argument with her mom, and her mom was like, when are you going to stop screwing around and find yourself a nice Indian boy? And even up until, I don't know, might have been 10 years ago, her mom still had a picture of her prom date, with an Indian boy hanging on the wall. And, it's kind of like, hey, we've been married for an awfully long time now. Maybe it's time for your mom to stop pining for the Indian boy.
Well, maybe you could learn Bengali and start talking to him and stuff like that.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
Be an Indian boy.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the clothes.
Do you?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Explain the clothes. It's just...
So it's called the Punjabi, and it's a kind of a baggy, silkish kind of, it almost seems like pajamas.
And you have to wear that at the church or the
temple. You don't have to wear that, but on certain occasions I will wear that. Although I will say we were just at a wedding a couple of weeks ago, and the father, who's Indian, he said, I'm not wearing a Punjabi, I'm wearing a suit. He's like, we're not in India anymore.
Right.
Let's dress like we live in America.
All right, good for him.
So, yeah.
I was at a Hindu temple in Chicago, and I was wearing shorts, and they made me wear one of the, it almost looked like a skirt.
Sure.
Because my knees were exposed.
Oh, okay.
And you're not supposed to have your knees exposed.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And so I was walking around with this, it was like an extended kilt.
Yeah.
Came below my knees.
Okay.
And that temple was unbelievable.
Oh,
it's in
incredible.
Chicago. It's phenomenal. And the food below at the food court was phenomenal.
Amazing.
Hot, spicy. It was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about the Indian food, because I love Indian food.
Oh, I love
It's
Indian
not just
food,
curry.
No.
It's so much more.
Well, curry for them, when we hear the word curry, we think a specific flavor, the flavor of curry powder. That
Correct.
doesn't really even exist in India. That's not really an Indian flavor. Curry just means sauce. And so there's all kinds of different types of curries that, same thing with Thai cooking. It's, they have red curry, they have green curry, that kind of thing.
All right.
Typically what distinguishes Indian food a lot of times would be like anything cooked in a tandoori oven. So a tandoori oven is basically like a clay oven that gets super hot, like 600-700 degrees. And that's where they make the naan bread, and they cook the chicken in there, which, is marinated in spices. I love it all. Even stuff that I wouldn't have thought that I would have liked. I remember, I resisted trying goat curry for the longest time. And then I actually had some, and I was like, holy cow, I've been missing out on this for years. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And there was no reason for it other than I thought, goat, that doesn't sound good. Oh, it's delicious.
Right.
Love it.
All right, well, let's jump into a couple things. We just had the election.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
I'm gonna repeat a quote from Dan Carlin, who's a podcaster that I really like, who kind of stopped podcasting. He's got a podcast called Common Sense, and he's more of a libertarian. For 25 years, he's been saying, hey, we need an outsider for president. And when Donald Trump got elected, he kind of said, I got what I was wishing for, but I wish I had my lawyer present when I made the request.
All right, so what does that mean, though? I mean, put it into plain English for us.
Yeah, so, for me, I tend to lean more libertarian. I'd like to see smaller government. I think just about any time the government gets involved in anything, they make it less efficient, they screw things up. and you get a whole lot of unintended consequences that you can't predict up front, but then become very clear, going forward. You just said it in one of your podcasts, I felt the same way. I was actually planning on voting Libertarian for Gary Johnson the whole way through the election. And I went to his rallies and that kind of thing. I really liked Gary Johnson a lot, other than he had a couple of really bad gaffes that he just couldn't recover from.
He come on, man.
Yeah.
Some of those gaffes are huge.
I know.
And I voted for him in 2014. Or was it, 14? No,
Okay.
12.
12, yeah.
But I couldn't do it in 16 because of his gaffes.
Well, there's that, but then right at the end, it was kind of like, okay, I know that a Libertarian vote for president, it has meaning because you want to get high enough percentage that they can actually be a contender. But at the same time, I really couldn't stand the thought of Hillary Clinton as president. And right at the last minute, I started looking and reviewing, and I've got friends on both sides that are very strong right-leaning, very strong left-leaning, and I actually reached out to all of them and just said, hey, tell me about why you're voting for who you're voting for. And in the end, I decided to vote for Donald Trump. And I wouldn't say everything he does is bad, but man, I wish the guy would shut up and get off of Twitter and just do his job.
He's a narcissist, man.
Yeah.
There's no other word that fits him better.
Right. He just can't help himself.
But at the same time, the Democrats have nobody else to look at except for the reflection in the mirror because they couldn't put up a good candidate.
Exactly.
And so, we'll see what happens down the road. But he's making some monumental mistakes right now. And,
oh, yeah.
And the vote came in on the election, and it was not very good for the Republican Party.
Yeah, but this happens every midterm.
I see that, but this was much worse than the norm.
Yeah.
And part of it was the Trump factor. Part of it was the taking the party out of control that's in control.
Yeah.
But he had 2 years of both the House and the Senate, and not much got done.
Not right. Yeah, I don't know that I would say
no, it's
not
all
much
been
got
executive
done.
orders.
Right.
I mean, think about the legislation that's gone through. It's just one tax bill that they think is monumental, but it doesn't help you or I.
Right.
It helps a limited few.
I see some help from it.
Well, explain to me what the help is, because I don't see it.
Well, I paid less in taxes this year than I did the previous year, so I think the tough part with taxes in general is that the people who pay more taxes are gonna get the break versus the people who pay little to none. Okay, if you have a percentage of almost nothing, it's still almost nothing, right?
I understand that, but people like you and me are the people that are taxed with a burden.
Right.
The tax burden on us is extreme compared to,
in comparison
Jared
to our
Kushner,
income.
who never paid income taxes.
Right.
Because of all the loopholes.
Agreed.
So if you look at somebody like you and me, we make good livings, but at the same point we get taxed quite a bit compared to some of these very wealthy people.
Absolutely.
And so they got the tax breaks, but we're still sitting here, shelling out our percentage every time.
Absolutely.
And the people that are don't make much, like you said, a fraction of nothing is nothing.
Right.
So, I'm not happy with that tax reform, as they call it. But okay, let's move on to a different subject. This is a subject that we talk about all the time.
Okay.
It's more about podcasting, messages. You're a big fan of Tim Ferriss?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of some of the things that he has done, and I like his style. I don't know if he and I hung out together, if we would get along, but...
So what do you like about Ferriss?
Well, so I was introduced to Ferriss with his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, and he introduces some really interesting ideas about work-life balance and kind of what he describes as the new rich. And really it comes down to, if your needs are met and you have enough money to do the things you want to do, then what's the one thing that's a great equalizer? It's time. We all have the same number of hours in a day, right? So the question is, how do you use it? And he really, he helped guide me in a lot of ways to, I would say, in my career path, where I am right now. I have an interesting situation that, I don't know, maybe other people won't think it's so interesting, but I'm the sole sales representative for a German company. So I primarily work
the sole
alone.
Sales representative in the United States.
In the United States, yeah. Thank you for that correction. No, so I work alone. I head to Germany, 5-6 times a year for sales meetings or with client visits and that kind of thing. But by and large, it gives me a ton of freedom and flexibility in my life. Freedom to be here right now, right? And I'm still getting my work done. still getting whatever done needs to be done, and I have the ability to be there for my family. Now I do travel, and I guess
It's like 7 p.m. in Dusseldorf right now, so nobody's going to be getting a hold of you.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's one of the nice things about, my mornings. I tend to be a morning person. Usually I'm, in the office between 7 and 7:30, and there's a 7-hour time difference. So, I got 2.5, 3 hours each day where I'm really busy talking to my colleagues in Germany and doing that kind of stuff. And then at 10 o'clock, it stops. I don't get emails from them really. No phone calls, no nothing like that. And so then I can go off and do my U.S.-based business and, kind of take it from there. I do travel, which takes me away from my family, but I like travel. I enjoy it a lot. I've gotten to travel, not just with this job, with other jobs. I've been blessed to be able to travel all over the world and, see different cultures and make friends in different places. And it's, I've got a close network of friends now, just outside of Frankfurt, Germany, some of them are very, very good friends. So.
Well, the Ferriss thing, you introduced me to Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, I know. I lent
7
you his
years
book.
ago.
No, it was, yeah. I lent you his book, and the next week was when you dropped the CrossFit gym.
Well, the funny thing with that is I took a lot of the stuff he talks about. I think it goes in one ear out the other.
Yeah.
But the one thing is you choose your lifestyle.
Yes.
You choose it. It's
Yes.
not something that just happens.
Correct.
So when you choose a lifestyle, you have to make choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you make choices, then you can change the direction of your ship.
Exactly.
And you can't do that without making tough choices.
Exactly.
You know
And,
what I
and
mean?
I think the vast majority of people are stuck in a situation where they feel trapped, where they don't like their job, but they feel like, I can't make more money somewhere else, or I can't do something else. And, I'm more along the lines of, is my job perfect? No. There's plenty of days that I'm just like, maybe I should do something different. But there's also plenty of days that I go, this is amazing. And I would say there's a heck of a lot more days where I say this is amazing versus the days where I'm dissatisfied. It provides me with a good income, and I get to travel. The benefits of that travel, I build up, 200,000 frequent flyer miles a year. I get to take my family places with that. So that helps. And quite frankly, I've got a new tradition that I started. So when I first started working for this German company, it was 3 years ago, and I had to stay there for 3 weeks straight. So I was there over 2 weekends. That was for training and that kind of thing. And the first weekend, the company is based in a little tiny small town called Vectorsbach, which is 45 minutes northeast of Frankfurt. It's a total farming community.
You know what came to mind?
What's
Austin Powers.
It kind of feels that way. Yeah, exactly. So one of my colleagues who's from Munich, who had just started a couple weeks before me, said, well, what are you going to do over the weekend? You can't just hang around here. There's nothing to do. And I was like, got any suggestions? He said, well, do you ski? I said, yeah, I'd love to downhill ski. And he said, let's get you set up. So he got me set up at this place in Austria called Ski Welt, which is actually Europe's largest ski area, I think. And so I ended up just, taking the 6-7 hour drive to Austria, and it was amazing. It's skiing unlike anything I've ever been able to do, and it was so cheap. So you're in the Tyrol area where downhill skiing was invented, and you're on these mountains. It's gorgeous. I remember the first time going up the lift, I went mid-mountain and then got on the lift to go to the top of the mountain, and as that gondola started going, a steeper pitch, I started to go, uh-oh, what have I done? I got to get down this, right? And obviously I made it down, didn't break anything, but now that's become my tradition. When I go over in January for my January sales meeting, I stay over a weekend and drive to Austria and ski for a weekend.
But I don't think you're following the Tim Ferriss philosophy.
No?
Because you still have a job that you need to report to someone else.
Sure.
And you also have a job that, doesn't happen unless you do it.
True.
So one of
True.
Ferriss's premises is that you should have something that makes money for you while you're sleeping.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that, to me, is the direction, that I decided to go with.
Yeah.
And I think that he has a lot of good things to say, and that's kind of what I took out of it.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that. And so it's choices again.
Yep.
And when I decided to go and work for an airline, I knew that I'd be able to go around the world.
Right. Right.
And travel the world and experience a whole different thing.
The
And
other
that all
part of it-
came from
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss's
I
book.
know,
Think
right.
of that.
That's powerful.
You
Well,
know?
and it's my belief that we all go through seasons of our lives, right? So,
absolutely.
It's you look at Tim Ferriss. So he's not married, doesn't have kids. Well, he's going to have a very different life than me, right? because he has no problem hopping on a plane and staying on someone's couch for a couple weeks versus I want my kids to have a stable home. I want them to be in good school systems, and some of that requires a level of stability, and maybe not taking some of those risks. That doesn't mean that I don't take any risks. That doesn't mean that I don't look for those opportunities where I might do something in the future. I mean, it's interesting, you started doing this podcast and you called me and said, hey, I'm doing this. This has sort of been on my mind. I tend to be a maker. I like to make things. So usually it's, woodworking type stuff. But over the last, 6-8 months, I've gotten, watching some YouTube videos and listening to some podcasts of some makers. And it's amazing. A couple of these guys, basically, who have families, were able to quit their jobs and support their families and thrive by basically
doing what they want to do,
doing what
their passion is.
Now, again, though, they'll be the first to tell you, it's still a job. It's still work, right? You may not, everyone has a boss. It may not be somebody that you report directly to, but you have customers or you have subscribers and listeners, and they become your boss. And so, therefore, you've got to continue to do the things that then will cause you to make money.
But what I think that the difference, and maybe you're trying to say this and you haven't said it, but the difference is that when you have made certain choices in your life, it no longer becomes work. It becomes a joy.
Exactly.
You know, and that's where you need to get to
Right.
experience the lifestyle that you really want.
Absolutely.
It's not, God, I got to go to work today, or I got to do this. It's like, I'm going to go do this.
But
I'm going to go create this. I'm going to go
I'm going to say this,
do
though,
something that nobody else does.
With the job that I've got right now, which provides for my family, I don't have days where I get up and go, I don't want to go to work. Because I'm not going to an office where there's a bunch of office politics. I'm not sitting through 9 hours of meetings. I'm not triple booked with meetings. I don't have to deal with any of that garbage. Now, at the same point, I miss out on, I don't necessarily have the water cooler talk, right? I don't have somebody to go have a beer with after work. Whether that's good or bad, you miss a certain portion of that. It's not everybody who could do this.
Well, I think that what you do have is the freedom.
Yeah.
And that's the key point.
Exactly.
When you have the freedom to go see your kid at school at, it's
I
1
can
o'clock
volunteer.
play.
Right.
Or do all of that stuff. That's the freedom that you need in life.
Oh, and I'll tell you, this was a couple of years ago. We were building a new house, and we were technically homeless for 2 months. So we were living with my mother and father-in-law, which was a whole lot of people and a dog crammed into a relatively small house. Some friends of ours had said, hey, if you want to use our townhouse up on the North Shore in Lutsen, feel free, let us know when. So we kind of said, hey, let's do this. So I was able to, my family tends to sleep in, particularly when they're on vacation. So I'd get up at 6 a.m., I'd be on the phone doing my calls. Around noon or 1, my family's now getting up and ready to go and wants to go hiking and stuff.
They're just getting up at noon?
Well, they had been
buddy.
up, but they're laying around, right?
Okay.
They're watching stuff on, on the iPad or watching a movie or something, and slowly making kind of breakfast/lunch. But so, around noon or 1, I've got a full day of work in, and let's go out, let's go hiking, let's go to the beach, let's do whatever. And I didn't have to use vacation time, right?
Okay, so what other podcasts do you listen to? You mentioned Rob Wolf earlier. You still listen to Rob?
Not as frequently as I used to. I love Rob Wolf, and I love his podcast. It's just I don't have as many podcast listening hours as I used to have. So I used to have, hours a day of commuting, typically an hour each way. And so I consumed a lot of podcasts. Now, my commute is about 3 minutes. So I listen to podcasts. And
I hope that you have Take Your Best Shots podcast as one of your top listening podcasts.
Well, there's only 9, and I've listened to all 9 all the way through. This, I think, will be, 10 or 11?
Well, this will be the 10th one.
Okay.
And this is going to be the best one because, we have our new producer, Ivan.
Right.
And we have our sound fix. So that's a good stuff. Well, I want to go back to your skiing.
I still want to answer your question, though, about the podcast that I listen to.
Oh, well, continue then.
And I think we live in this day and age between, like, YouTube and podcasting. The amount of material that you can get is incredible. I mean, you can take college courses for free just watching YouTube, right? Now, you may not get the degree, but you're going to get the knowledge, and that's what's actually important. So I listen to Rob Wolf. I listen to a podcast called Making It, which is 3 of these makers that all have, big YouTube followings. And it's kind of funny.
And what do they make? Like canoes and stuff? Or?
Well, maybe. They make whatever. But basically what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I like to make stuff and I want to share this with the world. Whether it's not necessarily about making what they make, it's more about how do you solve problems and figure out how to make stuff with limited tools, limited resources. And, once they got, big enough, they started getting sponsors, right? So you look at their wood shops and you're like, wow, they got all this cool stuff and all that. But then you go, they started out with a circular saw and hand plane, you know?
Right, exactly.
And I've got a pretty nice, decent shop in my house. Through this process, I found a makerspace here in the Twin Cities, which is amazing, which has way more tools than I could ever imagine having and way higher end stuff.
Now, are the podcast guys involved with that business? The makerspace?
No, these podcast guys, one guy's in Kentucky, one's in New York, the other's in like Cleveland. So I've never met them. But I enjoy that. The other thing, though, is I really enjoy, I'm going to take us back to politics a little bit here. One of the things that is a big problem that I see right now in the United States is we've lost the ability to talk to each other. We've lost the ability to disagree and have a rational argument. I tend to be somebody that, I have my opinions. We all have our opinions, right? I can be changed. But you've got to be persuasive, and you've got to not call me names, and you've got to, actually have a conversation about it. Right now we're in this state where, if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong, and you're not worth my time. That's where people are.
You're a libertarian. You listen to people.
Right.
That's what we do.
So
if you're on the left or the right, they don't, because they're entrenched in their positions.
So there's a podcast that, there's an author named Malcolm Gladwell. Have you heard of him?
Never.
He wrote The Tipping Point.
I know that book, yeah.
He's got 3 or 4 books, which I've really enjoyed his books. Now, I don't agree with his politics, but I just discovered his podcast not that long ago, and I consumed everything that was out there very quickly. And even though I disagree with his politics, I really like his approach. He's a great storyteller, and it makes me think. That's what's important, is it makes me think and challenge the ideas that I previously held. And in some of his podcasts, he talks about racism, he talks about sports, he talks about a whole lot of different things that the actual thing that he's talking about isn't really that interesting to me. It's more about the conversation around that and the getting me to think.
Well, good. Do you listen to any others? I mean, don't go. I don't want to know every single one, but I'm curious to see what draws people to a podcast.
Yeah, well, I think when you've listened to, something draws you in initially and says, yeah, I'm going to listen to a second one. And I've got some podcasts on my phone that, like, I tried listening, I just couldn't continue. You start to, if you listen long enough, you almost feel like you know these people, which is one of the things I really enjoy about listening to your podcast is I know you.
True.
And a lot of the conversations you're having, I'm going, I'd like to ask this guest this question or that question, or, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well,
I've asked you to come on to be a special guest every once in a while.
Absolutely.
And you haven't had the time because you got sick or something like that with some kind of like
whooping cough.
Whooping cough.
Yeah, pertussis, which turns out it's no
How do you
joke.
get sick all the time, man? I never get sick.
I don't know.
I just don't know how you get sick.
I'm not sure.
It's like every time I call you, you got some kind of illness.
Because I've had the same thing for 3 months. I mean, like, it just hasn't gone away. I'm just now to the point where, you can hear me coughing every time we have a break or something like that.
Oh, I thought that was because you were smoking.
No.
You still smoke?
Yeah.
You do? Well, you got to quit doing that, man.
I know.
Eventually.
Probably doesn't help anything.
Well, I think you got a point there.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to go back. You told me a story, and I really like this story, and I want you to tell me again. Is that when you went skiing in Austria?
Yeah.
You met up with an Irish bloke.
Yeah.
And I want to hear about that story because it's a first of all, I can't wait at some point in my life to see an Irishman ski.
It was good.
But the other part is that that's how Irish people are.
Yeah.
And so go into that and just tell me what this guy did, man.
Yeah, so, again, I spent a lot of time, in my own head as this was last January. I'd driven the 7 hours or whatever to get to Austria. And the next morning, I was, going to the ski slope, and I was kind of thinking, I'm really excited to ski, but it's going to be a lot of riding on the gondola with people that don't, I don't know, that speak different languages and that kind of thing. So I get in the gondola, the very first ride up, and, my head, my brain is thinking that I'm just going to hear French, Italian, German, that kind of thing. All of a sudden I hear English, and I'm like, what's going on? So I just say to these 3 people, I'm like, I can't help but notice that you're speaking English. I'm surprised, and this is kind of cool. And they go, oh yeah, one guy, Mick, he's like, I'm from Ireland, but I live in Dusseldorf, working there, and the woman was from Munich, and there was another guy, I don't know where he was from. We started talking, and I just said, hey, you mind if I ski with you guys? And they said, yeah, join us, right? So I ended up skiing all day with them. Kind of an interesting story. Mick, the Irish guy, he met.
By the way, that's a classic Irish name. I love that name.
The woman was one of his buddy's Tinder dates. and he said, hey, you're going towards Munich, you should look her up, right? So he did. I think she didn't feel comfortable, so she had invited the other guy. So it was this kind of weird situation, but, you know.
How do you get yourself into this stuff, man?
I don't know.
So you have one guy's former Tinder date. So he asked her.
Yeah.
And then she asked another guy.
Yeah.
And then you're this American guy
that
just shows
happened
up.
to show up, right?
I mean,
so the guy that I don't know where he's
so
from.
none of these people were friends.
No.
2 hours, an hour, 6, 7 hours, whatever it is.
A couple of days before or something, yeah.
Okay, so how did that go? Did you go and have some drinks with him afterwards?
So the one guy that wasn't Mick, he had some other buddies skiing, so he kind of took off and disappeared. So I ended up hanging out with the woman and the Irishman, and we.
What was the woman's name?
I can't remember offhand. Mostly just because I'm on the spot.
How about Monique?
I think it was Mary.
Mary.
Yeah.
That was close.
Yeah. It was interesting, though, actually, because, this was last year, right? So American politics are such a big deal, and they started asking me about it, And it was, again, one of those refreshing things where they were just asking out of genuine curiosity. And they were like, wow, we only hear what we see in the news. And, in general, I sometimes think that European news is a little bit more representative of news.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the same time, we've got, a lot of our news here is very left-leaning, and a lot of their news there is very left-leaning. So they take the left-leaning stuff and then they bend it left even further in some cases. But
and you don't think we do that here?
Oh, we certainly do that
okay.
here. Who knows what to believe anymore, right?
Yeah.
But they started asking me questions, and I kind of talked them through my positions, and they were like, wow, that's really interesting. Okay, we just thought you guys were a bunch of crazy people up there. I was like, no, there's a reason Donald Trump got elected. There is a very strong reason. Is it the right thing for America? I don't know. I'm the guy who voted for Jesse Ventura, right? And it was sort of the same kind
so
of thing.
Did I.
It's like
but that was again a one-up vote for me. I wouldn't vote for him in the second term.
No, me either. But I don't think he ran for a second term either.
No, he couldn't stand it. He hated that job.
Right. But it was, politics in Minnesota at the time needed a shake-up, and he did some good things for Minnesota. It's.
Yeah, I got that trolley noise outside. I thank Jesse every day for it because he's the one that started that all up.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's cool about the Irishman. Now, was he the typical Irish guy? Did he like to drink some beers?
Oh yeah, we drank some beers. It was kind of funny. We were sitting, kind of near the end of the day, and they don't do night skiing there. So we were at the top of the mountain having a couple of beers, and all of a sudden they go, "Oh crap!"
Having a what?
Couple of beers.
Oh, okay.
They go, oh my gosh, we got to go. We got to catch our bus, our bus ride back to Munich. And, I was kind of like, well, no, don't leave your beers. I said, you know what, I got a car. I'm going halfway to Munich anyway. I'll just drop you off in Munich. So I ended up, they said, oh, cool. So we hung out, drank what we wanted to drink, and then hopped in the car. I drove them back to Munich. We all went and got some dinner together. And then, I ended up dropping them off and just went back to my hotel, which was right on the border.
All right. So where have you been around the world? You said you traveled around the world. Don't give me the lineage of every place, but give me a top 3 interesting places because I want to compare them to where I've been.
Okay, so my favorite place, and I've been there twice, is Rome. I think Rome is absolutely amazing, and the reasons I say that is really the history.
Did you go there in July?
I went there in June for my honeymoon.
Well,
the first
that place is like a steam box.
Oh yeah, when we were there in June, they were having typical August weather. And it was our honeymoon, so we actually did a 2-week motor coach tour all around Italy, which was utterly
so you got
amazing.
on a bus?
Yeah.
You didn't actually walk the streets?
Oh, we had plenty of time walking the streets.
Right.
We actually, our flight out of Detroit was delayed getting over there, so we ended up missing the first day in Rome. And I don't know, I can't even remember how we found our group in the middle of St. Peter's. It was kind of strange. But when the bus came back at the end of the 2 weeks, we were trying to figure out what to do because we had like a night in Rome, and our tour director was like, well, you missed it the first time. She pulls out a map and she's like, you walk here, 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 and do this, this, and this. And we just went off and did that and had a magical time. And actually the next year then, this was back when it was Northwest Airlines, we were looking to maybe go to Vegas over Thanksgiving week or something like that because we didn't have kids yet or anything like that. And we just wanted to get away, and I couldn't find anything for 2 of us for Vegas for under $1,500. And then an email comes through that Northwest Airlines saying, hey, round trip airfare and 5 nights hotel in Rome for $1,400 for 2.
There you go.
And it was like, let's do it. So we had to travel on Thanksgiving Day, which, okay, but you don't have kids, and yeah, that's fine. So we went and did that and spent, basically 5 days wandering around Rome and just loved it. Second favorite place, and this surprised me, Berlin.
Okay.
So it was.
What did you like about Berlin? Because I've been to Berlin, and I liked Berlin, but I wouldn't put it in my top 10.
Well, so there's a couple of things, and again, it really comes down to the history, right? When you're sitting there and you see like the two bricks that mark the path of where the wall was, and you start to think about these people went to bed one night, and the next morning they woke up, and the Berlin Wall was there, and they couldn't see their neighbors across the street. You can see the shelling marks on buildings. The museums, they've got more museums per capita there than anywhere else in the world. And it's, because the Nazis, everywhere they went, they said, hey, this is cool, let's take it back. But they have like a Greek temple that was basically disassembled and then brought to Germany, and they built a building around it.
Yeah, a lot of Berlin was destroyed.
Yeah.
And you see half buildings now.
But think about this. So you've seen the gates of Brandenburg, right?
Yeah.
The Brandenburg gates.
Those are beautiful, by the way.
And think about this, though. Napoleon went there when he conquered and took them back to France. I mean, and these things were enormous. They didn't have trucks. They didn't have cranes. He was like, this is cool, we're bringing this back. So it's,
right.
Wow, that's crazy.
All right, so what's number 3 on the John Mullin list of favorite places to travel?
I'm going to say Tokyo. And I'm going to say that just because you want to talk about culture shock, it's so different than anything that you could ever imagine. The food is completely different. The language, there's no, in Europe, I'm not multilingual, but I can kind of figure stuff out.
Right.
In Japan, no, there's no figuring stuff out.
I've not been to Tokyo, but Seoul, Korea was like that for me. The food was different, everything was different.
Yeah.
But what they do in Korea is they have signs in English, so it was pretty easy for me.
Yeah.
They don't do that in Tokyo. I think they do it in the train stations, though. Is it in English as well?
This was over 10 years ago that I had been there,
okay.
so they probably do. It was a work trip, and we had the host from the company who was a Japanese national that lived in the United States, and so he went with us, took us. But customs are very different too. I remember, so I was the senior manager at the time, and we got to Tokyo, and there was a hotel where our host stays pretty regularly, and later on we were going to go meet with the actual company, like a day later. He invited me to the bar, and all my colleagues who had been there before, they said, this is a big honor, you need to go. And I was like, but I'm so tired and jet lagged. They're like, no, they've never invited us, we're too junior level, you need to go. So I go to this bar, right, and waitress comes out, and she's got 3 bottles of whiskey that he owns, that the bar holds for him. And these are not, this is like Johnny Walker Blue, this is some Japanese one, and then a couple, I think something Scottish. And at the time, I wasn't a Scotch drinker or anything like that, but they pour me a glass, and we're sipping, and, before I know it, they come and pour me another glass. And, this happens, I'm on like 3 or 4 or whatever, and I'm like, Girl-san, I can't drink anymore, but I don't want to waste your whiskey. He goes, oh, no, that's just the custom. They're not allowed to leave you with an empty glass. You have to just walk away. I was like, what? It's like, yeah, you just have to walk away. And I'm like, that's like a $150 shot. He's like, yeah, but you just have to walk away, or you'll just end up drinking here all night until it's
Well,
gone.
don't you anyways, though?
No,
You didn't need anybody to fill your
that's
glass
true.
up more
That's
than
true.
once.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start a new thing, and you're the right
Okay.
guy to do it.
All right.
I want you to ask me a question.
Yeah.
Like what, because I'm going to ask every guest from now on
Okay.
to ask me a question.
Yeah.
And then we're going to build off of that.
Okay.
So you're going to be the guinea pig.
All right. So I've known you now for 8-9 years, and I've seen some interesting changes happen. In particular, you went and lived in Amsterdam part-time for 6 months or something like that.
14 months.
14 months.
Yeah.
Okay. So I saw a distinct change in your personality, how you behaved because of that, and I saw that you went from almost being, you were always libertarian, but you were much more right-leaning to, I feel like you're now much more open. The podcast that you just released yesterday about, gun control, that was something that 5-6 years ago I would have never.
I never would have said
Mike Griffith
that.
would have said anything along those lines. You would have
Never
been more
would have
like,
done that.
right. You would have been like, well, I've got 6 guns. I think I need a 7th and an 8th.
Right.
So tell me about how travel has changed your worldview and your experiences.
That's a good question, John. Just off the top of my head, the biggest thing that's changed is you get to see how other cultures live. And, a lot of times in this country when we're brought up as young children, the United States is the greatest country on earth, and our way is the only way.
Yeah.
And when you go and travel, And the way I travel is I don't stay at the ritzy hotels. I get down and dirty with the public. And you get to see that people can live with less and be happier.
Yeah.
People can live in societies where they have things, security.
Right.
They have jobs.
Right.
You know, they don't have to have, you know, $800,000 a year jobs.
Right.
Or $100,000 a year jobs, whatever the number is
Right.
for people. They can live a life that is simpler, and they are much happier.
Right.
They also live lives, I think, that are a little bit more community-based.
Yeah.
Whether, you know, you're in the Netherlands or in Germany or Ireland or even in the Asian countries, you see more of a community.
Yeah.
You see people taking care of each other. It's not so much as like silos as we see here.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of freedoms here, and sometimes I think the freedoms have led the way to people being crazy.
No,
in a lot of
truth to
ways,
that, yeah.
and they feel like they are owed, or they are destined for, you know, greatness, and that's the only way that they can be happy.
Right.
You know, we also have a lot of people here that are spoiled.
Yep.
And you go to other countries, and when I was in Amsterdam, or the outside of Amsterdam, I got to see a society that is pretty well off. They're educated for the most part.
Yep.
They are able to live a good life. They are happy, and you know they do things that are different. And part of that is like, you know, in Amsterdam they have soft drugs are legal.
Yeah.
So you don't have, you know, that crime aspect.
Yeah.
The police don't even carry guns.
Right.
You know, I've been over there for 14 months, and I don't think I saw more than 10 police officers.
Yeah.
The whole
It's
time.
just not necessary.
It's not necessary.
And they
They're
have all
there
these
for
things
emergencies.
that, you know, so prostitution's legal there, right?
That's
they have
right.
rules around it, but the women who, and probably the men who are participating in it, they're able to get health care. They're able to be, you know, it's not this seedy underworld.
Right. They have access to things that provide them with at least a certain level of life.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they're not out stealing, or they don't have to go out and,
Right.
you know, do their trade underneath the radar. And
Right, exactly.
then everybody's, you know,
Where
in
somebody
bad
can
shape.
beat them up because they're doing something illegal anyway, and you know. that
Right,
kind of
and
thing.
so you have that, and I'm not saying that's a perfect world, but you know, you also have more stability, I think, between the lower class, let's say income-wise, and the upper class
Okay.
is much smaller than
Okay.
here. Here, it's stratosphere land,
Right.
where you have the very wealthy, and you have the very poor.
Yeah.
And over there, you don't have that. There's more of a safety net
Okay.
for the poor. You know, it's one of the things where in the Netherlands, where the nonprofits, you know, like in the United States, somebody that's an executive for a nonprofit, let's say Goodwill, makes like, you know, $8-10 million a
Right.
year.
Right.
Over there, if you're in a nonprofit, you cannot make more than the prime minister makes,
Okay.
which is equivalent to $330,000.
Right. Which makes sense.
You know, so the money needs to go to
Yeah.
the organization, not to your wallet.
Right. Right.
And so there's a lot of little things like that. But the biggest thing for me, when you travel and when you live in a place, the people are so much more open
Yeah.
to differences.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Europe is panacea and it's the greatest place on earth, but what they do is they're not afraid.
Right.
Here, people in the United States tend to be more afraid of anybody who's different.
Yeah.
And that's whether it's you know, the skin color,
Right.
whether it's the God that they choose to worship. People are afraid, and that fear is the biggest thing that I see. It's non-existent, or at least it's much smaller in other places. They're not scared of other people.
Yeah. No,
You know?
I would agree with you on that.
Except for when you're in Italy, you know, and it's late at night, and you've got the mafia running around. I bet you some people are scared then.
Oh, I'm
But,
sure there's plenty of that.
other than that, you know, that's pretty much it. That's off the top of my head.
Okay.
All right, so that was a good question.
Yeah.
I want to say thanks for coming in.
Cool.
And I appreciate it. And we will get this podcast out on Wednesday.
All right.
And hopefully everybody sees the difference with our new steadfast producer we'll do.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be fantastic. So
All
thanks
right.
for coming in, John.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Take Your Best Shots podcast number 10.